welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
And this is the podcast where every week we fire up the randomizer, which is where we dump thousands of hours of wrestling TV shows from all kinds of streaming service all around the internet. We dump it in the randomizer, we fire it up, and it will randomly pick us a show to watch. And it picked us a good one this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, it could be any wrestling TV show from pretty much anywhere throughout the world that we are able to grab episodes from the internet, from streaming services or other sources, and throw them into the randomizer. It spits something out. And yes, it gave us something this week to watch that is near and dear to my heart. One of, if not my favorite weekly wrestling television programs of all time, the series, not necessarily this particular episode. We'll get to that momentarily, but WCW Saturday Night.
Yes, and we've got a lot to talk about with this episode of WCW Saturday Night. It's from August 14th of 1993.
I can't believe it took this long for the randomizer to give us an episode of Saturday Night, by the way. You know, Jeremy, because we do this podcast together, how often I'm asking, has it given us Saturday Night yet? Is it going to give us Saturday Night? When is it going to give us WCW Saturday Night? And finally we have it here, albeit, and we'll get to this momentarily, a slightly different format than your normal WCW Saturday Night show.
Correct. Usually I have to burst your bubble and say, no, it gave us NXT's Wild and Young era.
True.
Now, before we get into the recap of this show, I do want to remind all of our listeners, as we do have new listeners here to the podcast, that the best way to interact with the show is via our Twitter at WrestleAtRandom. It's the same for Instagram, Facebook.com/WrestlingAtRandom as well. And if you want to get bonus content, that feed with additional episodes every single week that you can only hear through a subscription, that's available on our Patreon, patreon.com/WrestlingAtRandom, where we have multiple tiers. One will give you the bonus audio every single week. You get a new show that's exclusive that will not be in the free feed. And we have another tier where you can be the randomizer, where you can pick the show to watch. If Adam wasn't the host, he would have paid his $10 to request a WCW Saturday Night for us to watch because the randomizer hadn't picked it.
It's what we always talk about off air, Jeremy. Like, we love doing this podcast, but it's also frustrating because, man, this would be, I think, each of our favorite podcasts to listen to if we weren't hosting.
Absolutely. There's also a tier where you can get a t-shirt as well. We have beautiful Wrestling at Random t-shirts, all available, patreon.com/WrestlingAtRandom. If you don't feel like going to Patreon, creating an account, you never want to be the randomizer, that's fine. That bonus content I described is now also available in your Apple Podcast feed. So if Apple Podcast is your podcatcher of choice, you'll see the bonus episodes right here alongside the free feed. It'll be marked as bonus in a subscription. You click a button right there for a monthly charge. You will get access to all of the bonus content. You could start binging the bonus content right now by subscribing in Apple Podcasts and getting the entire, as soon as you unlock it for the month, you get the entire back catalog of bonus content.
Yes, absolutely. And it's something that's definitely worth checking out. Like you said, if Patreon's not your thing and you just want a quick and easy way to get even more content than you're already getting through Apple Podcasts and support the show, it's definitely a good option. And you mentioned our Twitter account at WrestleAtRandom. We've got some posts up there if you go back in the feed from just this week, if you're listening in linear fashion, that show you exactly how to do that. Like Jeremy said, it's super easy. You just pull up your podcast feed in Apple Podcasts, your Wrestling at Random feed, and there'll be a button that says subscribe now. And there it is. Like Jeremy said, you will have more than 20 episodes of additional bonus audio available to you immediately. And then every Thursday at noon Central Time, a new bonus episode in your feed, in addition to the free shows that you're listening to that come out every Sunday evening.
It's definitely worth giving it a shot. So all the links I just described available, of course, at wrestlingatrandom.com. Now, without further ado, let's get into why you called tonight. Let's talk about WCW Saturday Night. In 1972, Georgia Championship Wrestling began airing its Saturday Night Wrestling program. It aired on a channel that would become TBS in 1976. This became the first NWA promotion to have nationally broadcast television. In 1982, the show was renamed to World Championship Wrestling. For 1 year in 1984, World Championship Wrestling actually was produced by the WWF, airing recaps and showing WWF matches.
That's a story for an entirely separate podcast or a Patreon feed. And man, talk about surreal television. Seeing Vince McMahon in the Georgia Championship Wrestling studios is as weird as it gets.
Yeah, just 1 year later, 1985, Ted Turner returned the 6:05 Eastern TBS time slot to Jim Crockett Promotions. In 1992, World Championship Wrestling, the show, was renamed to WCW Saturday Night. With the launch of Nitro in 1995 and the addition of the Thunder Show in 1998, the Saturday Night Show quickly became the C-level show, the third tier, and would eventually be canceled, just like WCW was canceled in the year 2000. Now, you mentioned this is a very important show in your fandom.
Absolutely.
How I know most people in our demographic, you knew where they were at 6:05 Eastern on a Saturday night.
Oh, for sure. I mean, my weekend as a child, and I'm 40 years old, my weekends as a child were completely centered around pro wrestling. I'd get up at 5:05 a.m. and watch the Power Hour. You'd have Worldwide on at 10 a.m. You'd have Superstars at 11 a.m. I believe those two were on Sundays. But then on Saturday, 5:05 is, as you said, WCW Saturday Night. If I recall, actually, here in Chicago, and everywhere else, Saturday Night aired at 5:05. But then right when it ended at 7:05, I would flip over to local channel WPWR channel 50 to watch American Gladiators.
Yes, I think I was on a very similar schedule. This was the show that taught me time zones. I remember being a child, and all the ads were 6:05 Eastern, and that's when I had to ask my parents,
"What's that?
What time is that here?" and then I learned time zones by knowing that this was 5:05 here in the Central Time Zone.
Yes, and 5:05 was the most important time on the weekends, because not only did you have Saturday night on Saturdays at 5:05, but then on Sundays, most Sundays, you had the main event at 5:05. So a very important time.
This show opens with a rundown of who's going to be on the show, and then we cut to a montage of Turner production scenes and skyline shots of Atlanta. I got real Saturday Night Live intro video vibes here.
I wrote the same thing. We get an intro with a very schmaltzy open, like it's Saturday Night Live or something. That's clearly the vibe they were going for here. And if you recall, when the show first started in 1992, when it transitioned from just being the pretty much bare bones pro wrestling show, World Championship Wrestling, initially WCW Saturday Night had a totally different feel. They had a ring in center stage at the center stage building, the theater where they would tape the show, but the matches weren't actually taped there. You have Jim Ross and Jesse Ventura, or sometimes a guest co-host. They do interviews, they would have promos, and then they would throw it to an arena where there were taped matches. So that was sort of a different feel. Whereas here, we're into the era of WCW Saturday Night where the matches and everything else are taped at center stage. There's no desk, but we do have, kind of like the old NWA World Championship Wrestling shows, sort of an interview area where the announcers are off to the side. The other noteworthy thing about this, before we get into the show itself, is that unlike the vast majority of weeks of this show, meaning WCW Saturday Night, where it would be 2 hours. Here, it's only a 1 hour show, which would happen occasionally due to preemptions from the Atlanta Braves baseball game. So it's kind of it's one of those deals where it's like the more things change, the more they stay the same. Because, then, as in modern times, pro wrestling on Turner networks sometimes got preempted or moved around or shortened due to real sports.
Yeah, the only real sport that would preempt WWF on the USA Network was the dog show.
Yes, the Westminster Kennel Club dog show. I believe it would be 2 Mondays in a row. It would be preempted. And then also, I think every once in a while, I don't know if the US Open tennis tournament was on USA every year, but I know for quite a while it was. Mm-hmm. And I was a big tennis fan back then. And so I recall a few preemptions then as well. Who didn't want to see, Jimmy Connors beat Andre Agassi, instead of watching Bastion Booger and Aldo Montoya?
Tony Schiavone and Jesse the Body Ventura are your announced team. And we are told this is the go-home show for the upcoming Clash of the Champions.
And I actually thought, this jogs some memories for me, that I thought Tony Schiavone and Jesse Ventura had much better chemistry than Jim Ross and Jesse Ventura. And I say that full well knowing that, like, I talked about on the Wrestle War 92 show how great Jim Ross and Jesse Ventura were on that show, particularly Jim Ross.
Yeah.
But a lot of times their styles did not mesh at all. Whereas, I don't know, to me, it seemed like Tony and Jesse, I don't know that they necessarily got along. It feels like they played off of each other better. And I feel like Jesse was a better partner for Tony than Bobby Heenan would be down the line.
Arn Anderson and Paul Roma make their way out representing the Horsemen.
Yes, as baby faces. And this immediately took me back. Wait, what's the date on this show again?
This is August 14th of 1993.
Yeah, so this is not long at all after they had introduced Paul Roma as the new member of the Horsemen. And this I vividly remember because they did it. They did the introduction at a Flair for the Gold interview segment that Ric Flair and Fifi would have, his now wife, in modern times. But if I recall correctly, and I'm pretty sure I do, all the rumors around that time was that Tully Blanchard was coming back and that Tully Blanchard was going to be a member of the Horsemen. I remember listening to Mike Tenay, of all people, had a wrestling radio show on, I believe it was WTAM 1100 out of Cleveland. Maybe it was syndicated as well, called the Wrestling Insiders. And I remember having my my Walkman, and I would scan and get it to just, come in all crackly and not clear. But I listened to that every weekend, and they had talked extensively about, WCW being in negotiations with Tully Blanchard. So I think people had their hopes set pretty high that it would be Tully, or if not him, a big star. And instead, it was Paul Roma. And I remember at the time feeling bad for the guy. And even more so now, we've talked about Paul Roma on some of these podcasts. We've seen him wrestle. He was a perfectly fine wrestler that, honestly, if he didn't have the stench of being a near jobber in the WWF for so long, he wouldn't have even been a terrible fit for the Horsemen when you consider his look, the fact that he was more than competent in ring, but it's not what people wanted.
No, as Lord Al Hayes would call him, Paul Glory.
Yes,
he also miscast as a babyface as well.
Yeah. Well, these weird interludes of Horsemen as babyfaces, they were just always very, very strange. This match, which we'll get to, is just Arn Anderson, it's like playing the Ricky Morton role in a match, is very weird.
Yeah, they will challenge for the tag titles at the Clash. They'll be taking on the Hollywood Blondes, Stunning
my favorite
Steve
tag
Austin
team of all time.
Yeah.
Stunning Steve Austin and Flying Brian Pillman. And again, that's not revisionist history. 11, 12-year-old me was at the UIC Pavilion every 2 months, basically, watching those guys wrestle in person. So, yeah, I'm hoping as we watch this show, my notes, as they say that, it basically is, we better get some Hollywood Blondes here.
Well, before we get the Blondes, we get their actual opponents in this match. It's Dick Slater, who keeps making appearances on this podcast, and his tag team partner, Beautiful Bobby, and they get no introduction. They're just in the ring already. And
a random team. Like it's so weird because just a year earlier, Bobby Eaton was in the Dangerous Alliance with Arn Anderson, one of the featured guys in the company, world tag team champions. And then here it's just the rapid descent, not of Bobby Eaton as an in-ring wrestler, because he was still great, but of him being a featured guy at all. And then he's paired with Dick Slater, who was still sticking around WCW. He'd be in the stud stable not too long thereafter. This is after his team with Dick Murdoch as the Hardliners. But this is, we talk about Dick Slater and like a guy that we didn't appreciate when we were younger. This is in the absolute heart of me not appreciating Dick Slater when I was younger, watching him here in WCW at 12 years old. I just thought he was a total nothing, and I could not have been more wrong.
Well, that's how they were absolutely positioned here. Two guys that are still talented wrestlers at this stage in '93, just positioned as nobodies. And I literally had to stop for a second and say, wait a second, where was Bobby Eaton in the Dangerous Alliance timeline compared to what I'm watching right now?
Yeah, and it's just months. I mean, it's
months.
Maybe a year. But still, even like the embers of the Dangerous Alliance after that War Games match, like he was still a featured guy pretty well into throughout the summer and fall of 1992. And then, this is around that time as well. I think earlier in 93, where he had a very brief run as Chris Benoit's tag team partner when Benoit had a cup of coffee in WCW that year before going back to Japan and then eventually returning to WCW in 1995, obviously with some ECW time there as well.
Well, here come the Hollywood Blondes. They join on commentary.
Yes. The only thing that I'm disappointed by is we don't get that awesome Hollywood Blondes theme music.
No, but we do hear Brian Pillman doing most of the talking, and him and Jesse Ventura chatting it up, and they do cut over to the announce position where
do they ever? And if you are a follower of us on Twitter, again at Wrestle at Random, you know what we're about to describe as far as the looks of these men. The picture, the screenshot that I posted is like a Norman Rockwell painting. Everybody's facial expressions, including Tony Schiavone's, it's perfection.
The Hollywood Blondes are standing there. It's just a quick fashion corner. We're gonna have to take
a quick, beyond even just a fashion corner, a look corner, if you could say it, for each of them. This is Steve Austin with not his long hair from like 90 or 91, but from still he's got a short but still flowing, luscious blonde locks. So certainly not the head shaved Stone Cold Steve Austin that you remember. And then Brian Pillman. With the long curly hair, he's let it get a little bit darker. And then the combination of clothing that each of these two men is wearing is it's pro wrestling at its finest.
Yeah, they've got their matching vests and no shirts, and then like jean shorts or like
board shorts.
Like board shorts for these guys, and then giant fanny packs.
Leather fanny packs. Yes, it is. It's incredible. And then you've got Jesse Ventura basically wearing his Beach Blast 93 costume here in the studio. Months later, I think he's wearing shorts, or maybe he's wearing pants. I'm not sure.
It looks like just white pants with a tie-dye tank top.
Yeah. That's what had me so much more distracted, was the tie-dye tank top and the sunglasses. I also just have to note, I don't remember if it's during this match or during several of the matches later. I love when Jesse Ventura is just going off on these tangents and like trying to rile up Tony Schiavone. Tony will say, "Jesse, why don't you turn around and watch the match?"
It's great. We'll have a clip of that later in the show for sure. So Slater and Anderson start out. They trade slams. Arn holds the arm of Slater, and Roma enters off the top, hitting the arm of Slater. As he comes into the ring, Eaton's able to tag in with Roma. Leapfrogs and a drop kick by Roma.
A great drop kick, which he hits several of them. This is also the point where Stunning Steve Austin here is so great at heel 101, where he's putting down Arn Anderson and Paul Roma, saying, how many times do we have to prove our dominance over the Horsemen? But then he puts them over and says how great of wrestlers they both are and that they're a great team, but they'll have to go to the back of the line for at least a year if they lose. It's the whole idea of, if you're not going to tell the people why and how the guys you're going to beat are actually good, then why should we care that you're beating them, or why should it matter? And Austin does a great job of walking that line between just being a disgusting heel and also a guy that recognizes the athletic ability of his opponents.
After Eaton was clotheslined over the top to the floor, Dick Slater comes in and he starts beating Roma down, hits a swinging neck breaker. Yeah, Austin on commentary here says, Roma is built for show and the Hollywood Blondes are built for go.
I love that. That was tremendous.
Double team by Slater and Eaton. Roma gets the tag to Arn, and he attacks both Slater and Eaton, running wild. Arn Anderson, babyface fire.
Which is great. It's different. Anytime Arn Anderson has babyface fire, I'm expecting him to turn on his partner within 30 seconds. That does not happen here. I love his, just again, like the snap and the acceleration on just little things that he does. Shoulder blocks to the stomach, just left hand punches. I should also note, for people who, have already listened to the WCW New Japan Super Show on our Patreon feed, or will be listening to that same show on the bonus episodes on Apple Podcasts, that Arn Anderson looks so much more comfortable here in this environment than he did in the Tokyo Dome just a year or two earlier.
Slater charges. He hits Arn and Roma. Slater and Eaton miss a double clothesline. Roma on the outside. He pulls Slater out by the leg. Eaton's inside. He hits a neckbreaker on Anderson, gets a 2 count. This time they hit the double clothesline on Arn. All 4 men in as it breaks down. Roma tries to roll up Slater, but Slater holds the top rope. Roma stumbles back into Eaton, where the back of Roma's head hits Eaton in the forehead, and a stun to Eaton turns around into an awesome Arn Anderson DDT. Roma holds Slater while Anderson gets the 3 count.
I loved this finish. It was creative without coming off too contrived, and it was something that, especially here in 1992, to come up with a finish that I don't recall ever having seen before or since. I admire the creativity for using something like this on what was basically just a throwaway match on a WCW Saturday night show. Very cool.
It was, to me, it was Arn Anderson at this point. Was using the DDT like people use cutters in modern time, right? Where I can come out of anywhere, right? And that's how Arn was doing his DDT. His DDT finisher could come out of it. He would float over and counter into a DDT, and this was another example.
Well, remember that show? It's for sure. And this is 1993. What I'm about to reference is from 1995, that Slamboree show that we reviewed, where he had the match with Alex Wright, that classic finish where he cocks his left arm like he's going to throw that great left arm punch. Alex Wright ducks his head to get out of the way of it, and Arn immediately grabs him in a front face lock and DDTs him. So that's another example. Very good point. That basically is, it's like a DDP or even a Randy Orton. It can come out of nowhere. But here with a DDT instead of a cutter.
Dustin Rhodes joins Jesse and Tony at the interview area. Dustin will make Rick Rude wait until the Clash of the Champions to find out who his mystery partner will be. And at this point, we get a rundown of the Clash of the Champions card.
Well, before that, though, I love that when this promo is over, Jesse says that it's unfair. And Tony Schiavone just casually says, well, get over it.
Here's a quick rundown of what this go home show was promoting. WCW World Title match: Big Van Vader versus the British Bulldog,
which is a rematch from a previous pay-per-view.
The tag team titles: the Hollywood Blondes against the Horsemen, as we mentioned earlier. The TV title: Paul Orndorff defending against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
So far, they're 3 for 3 in terms of matches that I want to see.
Sting versus Awesome Kong, not the women's wrestler Awesome Kong.
Yeah, this is not an intergender match.
No, this was a big fat guy in a black mask.
Oh, I'll have thoughts about the Kongs later on. I had not thought about those guys in a long time.
Dustin Rhodes and a mystery partner versus Rick Rude and Equalizer.
Yes, Equalizer again. A through line between this show and our New Japan WCW Super Show bonus episode.
That's right.
Here I'm thinking, is Dustin Rhodes' partner going to be Scott Norton? We'll finally get to see those two men battle for more than 2 minutes and 28 seconds, rather than the 0 seconds of that match that we're able to see on that pay-per-view. It's actually funny as well because I had to catch myself when Dustin Rhodes was doing that promo earlier, talking about a mystery partner. I'm like, oh, Ricky Steamboat. And then I realized, no, this is not the only time Dustin Rhodes has had a mystery partner at the Clash of the Champions, apparently. That was the mystery partner replacing Barry Windham when Dustin and Steamboat defeated the Enforcers for the tag titles.
Too Cold Scorpio will take on Lord Steven Regal.
I want to see that.
And, I missed a match. Johnny B. Bad versus Maxx Payne in a mask versus guitar match. Mask versus Norma Jean is Maxx Payne's guitar.
Apparently, and again, I was as hardcore of a WCW viewer at this point as you could be. I have no recollection of Johnny B. Bad wearing a mask.
No, this is years of seeing Johnny B. Bad not in a mask, and now he's putting a mask on the line. Like, oh no, we might see him unmasked, we had for years.
We might see that guy we saw a couple months ago, with strong memories of what his face already looked like. Yes, against Maxx Payne, as you said, with his guitar, because he was basically a more talented Van Hammer. His guitar, Norma Jean. So yeah, that's the rundown. And really, again,
and you'll have a special edition of Flair for the Gold with Ric Flair and Fifi the Maid.
I wonder, was that the Shockmaster one?
Ooh.
I wonder if that was the Shockmaster one, because then Shockmaster is that would be building to Fall Brawl.
That's a good. We'll have to. If you guys listening to this show, if that was the Shockmaster one, let us know. From Hong Kong,
not really.
We get Yoshi Kwan with his manager Harley Race.
Yeah, talk about a rogues gallery for of guys that Harley Race had. He was the manager of Big Van Vader, the world heavyweight champion and the most dominant force in WCW. He then also managed at the same time Yoshi Kwan and the Colossal Kongs.
Yeah, Yoshi Kwan's opponent is Brad Armstrong.
Oh, how dare you use that tone when talking about Brad Armstrong. The only thing that bothered me about this is that Brad Armstrong didn't get an entrance. Brad Armstrong is a tremendous professional wrestler. I was so excited to see this. Actually, so I just pulled up the Wikipedia for Yoshi Kwan.
I have notes because I went and looked it up because I wanted to know who this Yoshi Kwan was. So,
we know who he is. I just have to mention something about the name that he had in WCW and where it came from and what it was supposed to be.
Oh, yes, that's a good. Yeah, go ahead.
So
then I'll talk about his other characters. Yeah.
You'll explain who he was after I do this. But upon returning to WCW in 1993, this man was given the ring persona of Yoshi Kwan and was managed by Harley Race. Originally, the name was supposed to be Yoshi Kwan, a Chinese name, but Tony Schiavone announced the first name as Yoshi, which is Japanese, and it stuck. So Tony Schiavone, talking about Yoshi Kwan, not too far removed from him butchering Jushin Thunder Liger's name in the Tokyo Dome at the WCW New Japan Super Show, keeping it going here with Yoshi Kwan.
Yeah, I went to Wikipedia to find out who this Yoshi Kwan was, and holy crap, it's Chris Champion from the New Breed, the late 80s NWA tag team, the New Breed.
Yes,
Chris
and I believe
Champion,
the brother of former member of the WCW Special Forces, Todd Champion.
I totally remember the New Breed as a tag team in the late 80s. Awesome. In 91... he worked for USWA.
He was also in Continental during that time period when we reviewed Continental.
Yes, where Chris Champion worked as Cowabunga, dressed in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles bodysuit and mask, where he would do the same gimmick in Japan for FMW.
Yeah, just imagine like him getting blown up by Atsushi Onita in the knockoff Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles gimmick. Yeah, it's what a career this man led. He actually went on to wrestle as Yoshi Kwan on the Independents, as well as returning to to FMW for a tour. He returned to USWA in 1996. Talk about burying the lead. 1996 USWA still existed. And then he resurrected the Turtle Common character for a promotion that in all seriousness is one of my favorites of all time, Battle Arts in Japan. He made a one-night appearance as Yoshi Kwan in October 2017 for the Southern Wrestling Federation in Tullahoma, Tennessee, losing to Petey St. Croix. This was after having suffered a stroke in 2002, and he sadly passed away in 2018 at the age of 57 years old from another stroke.
So Yoshi Kwan brings a bag with him in this match that used to belong to Cactus Jack.
Yes, this is part of the Cactus Jack Amnesia Lost in Cleveland storyline that I'm sure if you go up to the WrestleCrap website, there is
McFoley
a large
about
wing of that website.
Yeah,
a large wing of that website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Yoshi Kwan, he moves like a guy trying to move like the Great Muta.
Yes, that is the best way to describe it. He also, even though he, this is many years before we would see the man that I'm about to mention, he comes off, to use your verbiage, as the most Kirkland's low-key ever.
Yes. So Brad Armstrong with a hammerlock, but Kwan with a palm strike to the throat breaks the hold.
We should also go back and mention that when they're talking, they go back during this match and they're referring to the mystery wrestler, the mystery tag team partner of Dustin Rhodes. And Tony Schiavone says, we need to be very clear. This mystery wrestler will drive a Camaro Z28 into the building, and that's when you will learn how you can win the same Z28. Jesse says, is that a used car? And Tony Schiavone is deeply offended. And he says, this is WCW. What do you think we are? And Jesse just says nothing. And I howled with laughter.
It's a valid question. This is the company that pays Michael Buffer a lot of money in 1993 here.
Yes.
Yoshi Kwan with an armbar, but Armstrong hip tosses his way out. But Kwan with a leg sweep from the ground. Some unique offense.
Yeah, it was nice, fake martial arts guy stuff. He's just like, he's moving around the ring, as you said, like in this very affected, almost prance. He's trying way too hard to be Asian martial arts guy. And it's just, you know, even though they've got these painted on eyebrows, it's just, he's got some like white face makeup. It's just a really ridiculous look. Then Jesse Ventura compares the way Yoshi Kwan is moving to a praying mantis. Then he goes on a tangent about how praying manti eat their husbands when they are done having sex with them. And Tony Schiavone just lets out the most audible sigh you've ever heard.
Stalking Brad Armstrong. Look at this Yoshi Kwan.
Did you know that female praying mantises eat their husbands when they're done? having sex, Tony?
A spin kick again. Turn around and watch the match here, Jess.
So end of your science lesson for today, Tony. Let's get back. Whoa!
Kwan hits a jumping spin kick. Armstrong fights back with right hands and a big drop kick, and the crowd is getting into it.
Yes, a great drop kick, and the crowd is getting into it because Brad Armstrong was awesome. He had a connection here with the fans in Atlanta. I will go to my grave saying that WCW should have at least tried pulling the trigger on him as a hillbilly Bret Hart. There was potential there, but they didn't do it.
Yeah, this is one of the points where we diverge and we disagree on the greatness of Brad Armstrong. There's too many matches in the late 80s where I had to sit and watch Brad Armstrong do long arm bars and just be hideously boring. And so even if he got good in the early 90s, I was still every Brad Armstrong match I end up going to see is just always he's just a boring guy. I've just always been bored by Brad.
See, I love like 91 to 96 Brad Armstrong. You get Fantasia Brad Armstrong, mix in a little bit of Arachnaman Brad Armstrong, and then here light heavyweight underrated Brad Armstrong. Just again, for me, in the all movement Hall of Fame, I just love the way the guy just effortlessly floated and flowed throughout the ring. His side Russian leg sweep with a float over, an underrated finisher here in the early 90s. I'm a Brad Armstrong guy.
Armstrong tries his finisher, the aforementioned side Russian leg sweep, which is the proper boring finish for boring Brad Armstrong.
Man.
Kwan.
Unfair.
Kwan holds the top rope. Armstrong falls down. Kwan jumps on top with his feet on the bottom rope for the additional leverage and gets the pin.
This is great. So what happens next? And again, the finish was fine other than the fact that the wrong man won. But Tony Schiavone goes down to ringside to interview Harley Race. And I assume at this point he's going to interview Harley Race and Yoshi Kwan. We'll get to that in a moment. But so that leaves Jesse Ventura to do the replay description himself. And as the finish happens, another direct quote from Jesse Ventura, he says, "Ref don't see nothing because he's always blind."
Tony interviews Harley Race while everyone chants, "We want Sting," really loud.
Well, he interviews Harley Race, but who is flanking Harley Race? Not his charge, the man who just won the match some 30 seconds prior. No, Yoshi Kwan has been sent to the back. Instead, Harley Race is joined by the Colossal Kongs, who I actually thought were great because they were so pathetic looking. They were the perfect henchmen for Vader. I felt like they really, and I felt like that at the time, and I think so even more now, they would just be the perfect cannon fodder for guys going after Vader because they are short, fat, wearing masks, like similar gear to Vader, but they just look so doughy and pathetic compared to Vader that it's like if you photocopied Vader like 8 times and kept copying the copy and copy until it just looked less and less recognizable. Eventually, what you would get is the Colossal Kongs.
No, it's you need some fat guys flanking Vader to make him look svelte and ripped.
Yes, and
yeah.
There was, I don't know, they didn't go all the way with it. I was very disappointed. We should mention that this is not too long after Harley Race was managing the Super Invader. So, like, think of the guys they gave him other than Vader.
No wonder I never think of Harley Race as a manager because he just managed the worst of the worst.
Yes.
Race says that Vader will beat the British Chihuahua. He just had a man. He says, "We just had a man eclipse my record, and the gutless dog is not wrestling at the Clash." He's talking about Ric Flair. He calls Ric Flair a gutless human being. He won the world title, and he doesn't have the guts to put it on the line at the Clash.
Well, this is where, if you are a casual viewer of WCW, if you're just parachuting in, this is where you're thinking, what in the hell are they talking about? I was just told earlier in the show that Vader is the world champion, and he will be defending said world title against the British Bulldog. So what what belt does Ric Flair have? This isn't like
Thank you. Because I have this written down in my notes, because Flair comes out as the 10-time world champion, and he's got the big gold belt, and I'm like, so what is happening here? So Flair is the NWA world champion, and Vader's the WCW champion. These are two different things. I'm a hardcore fan, and I'm confused.
Yes. So what happened was that again, I hate to keep going back to our WCW New Japan Super Show, but you remember that with Flair and Fujinami and the whole controversy over the NWA WCW world title. They settled that at Super Brawl, and then the NWA world title just sort of faded out of existence. And then in August of 1992, it came back, and Rick Rude won the title in the G1 final / NWA world title tournament final in Japan, defeating Masahiro Chono. And then so in WCW, you had these two competing world titles. And then in 93 into 94, there was the dispute with the NWA. WCW kept the big gold belt and had renamed it the International title. But yeah, here it's Ric Flair, a couple of years removed from appearing on WWF television with the big gold belt, but not being the recognized world champion. Here in WCW, he has the big gold belt, and he is a world champion ostensibly, but it's not the WCW world title. Confusing.
Yeah, if you want, this is wildly confusing. If you want to hear me, though, talk about the history of Flair with the big gold belt in WWF, listen to our Royal Albert Hall show from season 1.
Yes, one of our most underrated podcasts, I think. Just an off the beaten path, wacky show that almost feels now like it would have fit more on the Patreon feed than on the free feed. But yeah, super fun, just sort of weird time capsule of a show with, I believe, one of Ric Flair's first WWF singles matches, at least that was televised in any way, shape, or form, against Tito Santana, of all people.
Yeah, so Harley pushes Flair. Flair punches Race.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you right here, face to face, you've got no guts.
First of all, we've been listening to you for a long time, Harley. As far as these guys go, I think Sting could beat both of them at the same time. You want to match it up?
Tell you something, man.
No. And as far as me not having an opponent, maybe nobody around here figures they can beat Ric Flair. How about that, buddy?
Let me tell you something, Flair. Guarantee you that either one of these guys.
Now, when you were the world champion, you liked somebody pushing you. You didn't like that, did you?
But I'll do it again.
Ric Flair nails Race. Fans, we gotta take a break.
If he's got any guts, he'll get in the ring.
Fans, we'll be right back.
Fun exchange with two legends here.
Yes. Flair is great. Harley's saying, or Flair comes out and he says, we've been listening to you for a long time, blah, blah, blah. And after Race says, that Flair doesn't want to wrestle, Flair says, well, maybe no one around here thinks they can beat me, which is just a perfect line. Harley is, I'm sure you probably heard on the clip that I believe Jeremy inserted, is screaming about if Flair has any guts, he'll get back into the ring. Super fun segment. I was not expecting to get Flair versus Harley Race physical altercations here on the show in 1993, but I enjoyed it.
Sting comes out and, newsflash, very popular.
Yes. And not only does he comes out to a man called Sting from the Slam Jam record.
I believe we talked about the Slam Jam record on a previous podcast as well.
God, I wanted that so bad as a kid, and like my mom wouldn't buy it for me, and I was very upset.
His opponent, Robbie Eagles.
Yeah. So if you're a fan of New Japan Pro Wrestling, particularly for the Big Audio Nightmare listeners, this is not Robbie Eagles of New Japan fame, one of the best junior heavyweights in the world. This man bears no resemblance to that man.
It's
I don't
Robbie
know.
Eagle without an S here, but
Yes,
I threw
and
the
that
S
S
on there because it was funny.
Yes, exactly. That S apparently made all the difference in the world. All the talent and good genes were in that S, because the Robbie Eagle portion did not work out too well. This is a young, doughy looking dude in a black singlet. He's one of those guys that has the face of a 12-year-old and the body of a 55-year-old. Just a really, really weird look. And of course, he slapped Sting immediately.
Yeah, the crowd gives us a whoop, there it is chant,
Yes!
which is really weird.
That was a thing. Back then, every time a babyface was out, both like at the start of a match, and then that was the way they rallied the babyface when he was being beaten down. It's very particular to Center Stage. Apparently, they were fans of not only tag team wrestling, but the group tag team, and would bust out the whoop, there it is. It's very odd to hear if you were not a weekly viewer, if you're parachuting in.
No, I parachuted in here and I was like, whoop, there it is, bold choice. And it's really weird that everybody got into it.
Yes.
Eagle, you mentioned he slapped Sting. This was a very gentle slap. This was
a caress in motion.
Yes, this was so Sting just immediately backs him into the corner and unloads on poor Robbie Eagle, whips him into the other corner, Stinger splash, goes for the Scorpion Deathlock, and gets the win. A perfect Sting squash here.
Yes. Going back to that slap, it really looks like something that would have been on that Secrets of Professional Wrestling show where like they're showing how you do a move and don't actually hurt someone. That's the speed at which Robbie Eagle was going here. But yeah, super fun, quick, aggressive squash from Sting, who was wearing purple and yellow. Like he was basically, you could have put a furry cat head on him. He would have been Wildcat Willie.
After commercial, Davey Boy Smith is interviewed by Jesse Ventura. Doesn't really say anything of note, just at the Clash, he'll beat Big Van Vader and become the new WCW champion. Not to be confused with Ric Flair in the NWA World Championship we saw earlier in the show in a better promo.
Yeah, this promo, the best way I can describe it is that you would put this in the Smithsonian as the why Davey Boy Smith was never a world champion example.
Colonel Rob Parker.
Yes.
Here's a guy. He comes out to make introductions for his man Sid Vicious. Now, Colonel Rob Parker is Rob Fuller, who I was introduced to in the Continental show that we reviewed here in season 2 of this podcast. And Colonel Rob Parker was always a zero for me on WCW broadcasts in the mid to late 90s.
Another wrong opinion. You're just bringing them today.
And I was wrong. This one I will admit. I was incorrect. As I saw Rob Fuller in Continental, and I saw what a talent that guy was, now I can, as I see Colonel Rob Parker out there now, I know what he could be, and I said I want more of the Colonel here as he made the introductions for Sid Vicious. Sid comes right in and starts destroying young Jason Johnson.
Yeah, this talked earlier just a few moments ago about Sting and being a great aggressive squash. I'm not going to take that back. I'm going to dial back my praise, because Sid Vicious is, to me, we talk about Mount Rushmores of different things in pro wrestling. Sid Vicious absolutely belongs on there when it comes to squashing jobbers. He was built, he was made, he was put on this earth to do exactly what he did here in this segment.
Yeah, I loved it. He destroys him. They're on the floor. He drops him throat first across the guardrail, presses him over his head to toss him back into the ring. Sid follows him right in, hits the power bomb, and just a great Sid squash, which all of them are. I don't think there's a bad one out there.
No. Well, and the funny thing, too, is this is basically, without Colonel Rob Parker, sadly, exactly what he would do some 6 years later in ECW.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tony Schiavone with world champion Ric Flair, not WCW champion. world champion Ric Flair.
Yes.
He's out there with the big gold belt. Because Flair isn't wrestling on the Clash. He asks for Sting, who they bring up like in a split screen. He's in the back, so they have a camera on Sting in the back, and
he's in the locker room.
He's in the locker room. He's and he's listening to Flair talk to him out at the interview area, and he basically asks for a favor at the Clash. Said, "There's 2 Kongs. You don't need my help, but can I be your partner at the Clash against the Kongs?"
Yeah, I loved everything about this more than any of the actual details of what they said. I loved the attention to detail in this segment. They bring up the split screen. Sting is in the dressing room, and then he's got his finger up to his ear.
He's
like
got the earpiece in.
Yeah, like he's listening with an IM. I love that. That little added bit of realism. Like, okay, it's not like he's just magically hearing what they're saying. You know, he's has a microphone or he has an earpiece, and that's how he's hearing it. It was great. It was perfectly logical what each man was asking for and what they wanted.
Yeah, Sting says, "You got something I want." He wants a shot at Flair's title, but Race and the Kongs come out, and Flair gets in the ring. He takes his shirt off, and he wants to fight the Kongs. Sting comes out and has Flair's back as the Kongs back away, and we go to commercial.
Yeah, tremendous stuff. Again, it was just perfectly set up. Each guy got what they wanted. It was a way to have Sting and Flair team where it's not like they're just forgetting about their past. You know, they acknowledge the fact, Sting says we've gone round and round and round. They acknowledge that they're not friends, but they each need each other for something. And yeah, super fun way to set up what I'm sure would be a total throwaway match, but the novelty of seeing Sting and Flair team against some big globular dudes, I'm sure was fun.
Main event, 6-man tag. The natural team of Lord Steven Regal, Maxx Payne, and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff.
Yeah, the first thing I thought when I saw this is I want a time machine for these men because I want to see Lord Steven Regal, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, and Maxx Payne with Norma Jean take on Goldust, the Hurricane, and Yoshitatsu from that WWE ECW episode. Maybe even make it a 3-way and throw in, Ted DiBiase Jr.? Who else was on that match? Or I don't.
From the NXT Wild and Young show. Yeah,
Ted DiBiase Jr., Maurice, and Brodus Clay or something.
Yes, that was it. Yep.
A 3-way 6-man tag match, a 9-man tag, if you will,
of just the champions of weird teams thrown together on shows we've reviewed.
Yes, and then at the end of the match, Tenryu comes out and declares them the War 6-man tag team champions.
Their opponents, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Too Cold Scorpio, and a very young Marcus Bagwell.
Yes, and while you may think, well, that's a pretty thrown together team too, Marcus Alexander Bagwell and Too Cold Scorpio were a regular tag team at this point. They had matching gear. I also like that Ricky Steamboat did his best to wear as matching of gear as he could. He wore his yellow trunks with the dragon graphics on the side with the yellow boots. So
I made a note of that myself. Another reason why Ricky Steamboat should be one of your favorite wrestlers, because he pays attention and wants to show teamwork by the team dressing together. Love it.
Yes, and this 6-man tag, by the way, is setting up 2 of the singles matches that would be coming up just days later at the Clash of the Champions, with Orndorff and Steamboat on opposite teams ahead of their TV title match, and Regal and Too Cold Scorpio on opposite teams.
Steamboat and Orndorff start out. It's all Orndorff early. Steamboat fights back with chops, but Orndorff bails to the outside. Sir William is helping Wonderful up. Who's this guy?
It's Bill Dundee.
Oh, that's Bill Dundee.
It's Bill Dundee.
How about that? Fans chant Paula at Paul Orndorff.
Which the only person that it made more mad than Paul Orndorff was Jesse Ventura. He always got so upset about this.
He tags Maxx Payne in. Shavani calls him an awesome athlete, and he's using the term athlete very loosely here.
Yes, the word awesome is doing way too much work here in that statement because it is. I mean, Maxx Payne did have, I believe, like an actual, like legit amateur wrestling background, but he walks in and he looks like the guy working the night shift on Sunday at Hot Topic. He's got these shorts and this shirt and this hair that scream as far to the opposite end of the spectrum as of awesome athlete as you could get.
Yes, we finally get Regal and Steamboat in together. Crossbody by Steamboat, shoulder block. Regal hits some awesome uppercuts, but Steamboat with a big chop and a couple of drop kicks knocks Regal outside.
And this is peak Lord Steven Regal, by the way, and just in terms of him being at his most, and again, not saying he's doing 450s, but at his most athletic, his least broken down physically. It also has by far his best gear, the blue tights with a little bit of red trim, reminiscent of a Tony Gurria match that we talked about earlier. That's where the comparisons end, though.
Yeah, Regal on the outside. We get great Regal facials, which we always love on this podcast.
The best. Just the absolute best. The all-time best facial expression guy. If you're looking for a heel to do just have range of expression and just make you crack up just with facial expressions, look no further than this man, who we can actually legitimately call for one of the first times on this podcast, Steve or Lord Steven Regal, unlike all the other times that X-Pac and others call him Steve.
Bagwell comes off the top and goes to work on the arm of Regal.
They refer to him as the WCW Rookie of the Year. And at this point, I'm thinking, how long was he a rookie? I remember seeing him, like, he debuted in WCW in 91 or maybe early 92 at the absolute latest, but I'm pretty sure it was late 91 because he was, when he first came in after being the handsome stranger in Global, he'd come in and he was like Sting's buddy, and he was basically cannon fodder for the Dangerous Alliance. That was well over a year prior.
Maxx Payne in with Bagwell, catches Bagwell trying for a crossbody. He catches him, slams him, but misses an elbow drop. This allows Bagwell to tag his partner Scorpio, who hits 2 drop kicks to knock down Maxx Payne. He drop kicks Regal and Orndorff. Drop kicks all around from Scorpio. He's running wild.
This is where the hundreds at center stage in Atlanta start chanting, "Whoop, there it is."
We get it again. Whoop, there it is.
I love it. It made me very happy. I also enjoyed earlier on in the match, Tony Shavani saying that we hope to have word by the end of the show on the Ric Flair and Sting situation. Jesse Ventura is tremendous here, saying, can you imagine the money it would take and what both of them would demand to make this happen? Jesse, again, doubting the financial wherewithal of WCW. And Tony says, WCW's got it. And Jesse's like, well, will they use it, though? I'm like, no, Jesse, they spent it all on you.
Scorpio with a slingshot from the apron into the ring, hitting a leg drop, then goes to the top rope, but as he jumps off the top, Maxx Payne holds the legs, so Scorpio crashes to the mat. Orndorff then starts working over Scorpio, hits a belly-to-back suplex.
This was awesome. You're underselling this belly-to-back suplex. He hit a great, like, Saito suplex backdrop driver. Wasn't expecting that.
Payne back in. They hit a double elbow. Regal and Payne double team him while we get a perfect gut-wrench suplex by Regal. Forearms in the corner. Scorpio trying to fight out. He runs towards his corner, but Regal grabs him by the arm, whips him back into Regal's corner. Scorpio goes up and over Regal in the corner, somersaults, and makes the tag to Ricky Steamboat.
Another super cool, creative thing, a way of, the other one we talked about earlier was a creative finish. This was one of the more unique ways to get into a hot tag that we've seen and played into both wrestlers' strengths so well. I also just want to go back briefly on the commentary side. At one point, Ricky Steamboat makes a save. Jesse Ventura says, basically, Steamboat shouldn't do that. Tony says it's allowed, and Jesse says it's not allowed if you play by the rules. Basically saying that because Ricky Steamboat is a fan favorite, he should have a separate set of rules, and he should not be allowed to do certain things that the heels, who acknowledge that they are bad men, are able to do.
This babyface Ricky Steamboat runs wild, beating all three guys. Then it breaks down into a 6-way. Steamboat takes out Orndorff on the floor, goes up top, hits a high cross off the top onto Regal for the 3 count.
Steamboat, Lord Steven in the far right corner. They are the legal man.
No, Steamboat's on the floor with
Steamboat's
Orndorff.
on the floor. Now there's Steamboat. Stay with him. He's the legal man. He's going up top. Regal better turn around here. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, that's robbery.
Steamboat.
Ladies and gentlemen, the winners of the match, the team of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Cold Scorpio, and Marcus Alexander Bagwell.
Stay with us, fans. I will talk to Ric Flair and Sting and talk about the clash coming up.
He does, but it's even cooler than you mentioned because Steamboat's on top. Regal ducks a back elbow from Bagwell coming off the ropes, and basically the moment he ducks that back elbow and his head emerges, he runs headlong into that crossbody from Steamboat. Another really cool, simple but creative finish. Pretty impressed by whoever put these matches together.
We see a graphic.
Oh, God.
Will Ole get back in the ring? Call Ole Anderson tonight on the WCW hotline. Calls cost 99 cents per minute, so kids must get parent permission before calling.
So I think that this must have stuck in your head so much that early on in this podcast, I don't know if you caught yourself saying for people that why they listen to this podcast, you said, this is why you called. I think that's why you had it in your head that you wanted to call 1-900-909-9900 and find out if Ole would in fact be getting back in the ring. I just love that they thought here in 1993 that the kids who needed to get their parents' permission would be so hooked to do so by the idea that Ole Anderson might come back to professional wrestling.
Yeah, only if it meant he would take Paul Roma's spot in the Horsemen.
Exactly.
We had to know. Tony interviews Flair and Sting to get Sting to agree to team with him at the Clash. He had to agree to give Sting a shot at the NWA title next Saturday night. So
man, the randomizer screwed us.
Both guys get what they want. They woo together as the show goes off the air, but we don't get what we want. I want Flair and Sting. We were off by a week again.
Yes, Flair versus Sting for the NWA World title. It's like being off for a week or off by a week on Mid-South and missing that Flair DiBiase NWA World title match. It's pretty wild that they were doing a Clash of the Champions on a Wednesday with Sting and Flair wrestling the Kongs. And then the next Saturday, it would be Sting versus Flair for a world title.
For one of the world titles that they had at WCW.
Yes, I feel like
in
it's
1993.
It's like when things were all weird and Stephen Colbert was doing his show nightly and he wasn't calling it The Late Show. He called it A Late Show until things got back to normal. Same thing here. It's a world title.
So, Adam, what was your favorite thing on the show?
That's a good question. Maybe the Sid Vicious squash in a weird way.
Yeah, no, that was great.
Oh, you know what? Actually, to me, it would be the Sid Vicious squash, or I actually think my favorite thing was the finish to the Arn Anderson and Paul Roma against the weird oddball team of Dick Slater and Beautiful Bobby. I love that. Really, the finishes, there's just a lot of really smart, intricate, like subtle sequences on this show. We talked about that finish, the finish to the main event, that hot tag sequence between Regal and Too Cold Scorpio. A lot of really cool understated stuff here.
My favorite thing on the show is whoop, there it is.
Accurate as well. Valid.
All the things you mentioned were great. Ricky Steamboat and Regal, also great.
Yoshi Kwan, fantastic.
So Yoshi Kwan is my worst thing on this show. That was the whole thing about Yoshi Kwan is terrible.
I'll agree.
Everything about that was bad. The British Bulldogs promo was bad.
That was not good. And again, like illustrative of why he was never a bigger star than he was. I will go more specifically, and it's about Yoshi Kwan, but Yoshi Kwan beating Brad Armstrong was the thing about this show that most deeply upset me.
And well, another favorite thing, I guess, for me too, was the confrontation with Flair and Harley Race. Those were two old friends having a great time together.
Exactly. Just winding back the clock and doing it one more time. I really enjoyed this show. Again, I'm biased because this is one of my favorite time periods of wrestling growing up. You know, what we loved at 11 or 12 years old, and wrestling to a large extent is what we're nostalgic for. But I actually really enjoyed this on a watch back. And yeah, I wish we could have seen next week's show, which had Flair versus Sting for the NWA World Title. It had the Hollywood Blondes in action. So yeah, good times, and we could have had even better if the randomizer was just 1 week later.
Hey, at least it didn't. You know, the randomizer has a history of giving us the dying days of shows.
Yes.
So thank goodness we didn't get the dying days of Saturday night.
Saturday night from like September of 2000 or
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
We would have had a hole-in-one Barry Darso in the main event, probably.
No, we would have had just a bunch of power plant weirdos that never made it to the.
Yes.
To
It would have
anywhere.
been a hole-in-one Barry Darso versus Horseshoe in your main event.
All right, and with
The
that,
main event anywhere in the world, I'll have you know.
and with that, we're gonna wrap it up. I want to thank you for joining us, Adam.
Yep. Thank you, Jeremy. My dreams fulfilled this week for the most part by the randomizer. We'll see what it does next week.
I want to thank everyone for listening, and please tell your wrestling fan friends about the show. If you can't support us through the subscriptions, we totally get that. Another way you can support the show is through telling your wrestling fan friends about the show. Tell your friends that used to be wrestling fans about it. Show them how to subscribe to a podcast. That is a great way to support us.
And tell your former friends who are wrestling fans about it as well. Maybe you can work out some sort of Ric Flair and Sting type of deal where you can team on a work project with them, and then they can, if you successfully complete the project, they can give you their bonus. I don't know, something like that. Maybe you'll be even more successful than Ric Flair and Sting were at such an arrangement.
I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.